Hey everyone, welcome to episode 68 of New Slang. I'm Thomas Mooney, and on this week's episode, I'm joined by singer-songwriter Colter Wall. Like most of y'all, when Colter came across my radar, it kind of blew my mind. It was one of those like, why haven't I heard him before? Like, where is this guy from? Kind of things. I practically wore out that first EP of his, Imaginary Appalachia. I'm sure a lot of y'all have or had as well. Me and Colter, we'd been, I guess, for like the last year kind of crossing one another's path on social media and whatnot. I'd written a few articles on his last record, Songs of the Plains. We had done an interview over the phone, but this was the first time we met. They were down here in Lubbock this past month, and they were playing a show at the Blue Light. So naturally, we kind of set up this little last-minute podcast. We had gone and eaten at Triple J's right before we did this, and so I guess with like, I guess like with a lot of these interviews, I do them right after sound check, and we typically just do it inside Blue Light right after because it's pretty quiet in there, and there's just a few bartenders and barbacks getting ready for the night. But this was a Tuesday, and it was kind of an early show. Blue Light was opening at 8 o'clock, and so we ended up doing it inside their van right in front of Blue Light. And so it was kind of interesting sitting in the driver and passenger seat versus in a corner table or something, or on a corner table. Folks were, for the most part, I don't even say for the most part, they were like, everyone was pretty courteous and left us alone for a while, but it did kind of have this like Jurassic Park kind of feel, because you're just in the car and you're just watching all these people line up to enter Blue Light, and sometimes they'd walk by and they'd just realize that it wasn't just two dudes sitting in the van, that it was Colter Wall and just some dude. And anyways, I guess it was a little bit of an interesting dynamic for that kind of atmosphere. I have to say though, like Colter, he's really a personable guy. Sometimes you think of these artists as guys who are just gonna hole up and wait behind the scenes and just go on stage and then go disappear again. And really that's understandable. I really get that. But with Colter, he was just around. He was smoking cigarettes out front, drinking a couple beers at the bar, and talking with folks and shaking hands, that whole thing. And I'm sure he's like that in a lot of places, but I think for this show right here in Lubbock, it was for two specific reasons that night. One, I know he had mentioned that they've been playing a whole bunch of like theater type shows, so it's a different kind of atmosphere. And he said he was really excited to be back inside a bar. And I guess it's one of those things where you at these theater shows, you're talking to people at the merch booth, and it's a meet and greet line for all intents and purposes. But at a bar, it's a little bit more natural, a little bit more free flowing. The second though is I think that like a lot of these people here in Lubbock reminded him of home. Songs of the Plains, his last record, it may as well be about the South Plains of Texas. You can exchange Toronto for Houston and Saskatchewan for the South Plains. I guess, I don't know, the Panhandle. It's a lot of the same kind of work, a lot of the same endless horizon. So I think in this interview we ended up talking about a lot of those similarities. So anyways, if you're just now listening to New Slang, I'd encourage you to subscribe to on iTunes or wherever you're listening. Give us a 5-star review while you're at it as well. And while you're at it, go ahead and follow me on Twitter. You can follow me at _New Slang. You can do so on Instagram and on Facebook. And if for whatever reason you're wanting to get a hold of me via email, you can send comments and questions and really just whatever at thomasdmooney@gmail.com. And one last thing. As most of y'all know, Luke Perry, he passed away earlier this week. There's an article I wrote about Luke and Lane Frost and the social significance of 8 seconds over on Rolling Stone. It was put out this last Monday. So I'd highly encourage you to also read that as well. Okay, so I'm not going to bother you with this intro any longer. Here is this van conversation with Colter Wall. Well, one of the things I was wanting to ask you about was obviously these 2 records here you've done with Dave Cobb. And Cobb, a lot of his stuff is really vibrant in a sonic way, right? Like you think of kind of more of the Sturgill stuff, the Stapleton stuff, Isbell, kind of all really, really big. And of course he comes from like a more of a rock and roll background. Especially this last record, you guys are like really bare bones.
Yeah.
I guess what is that like? What's the process with him that also like kind of drew you into to him and trying to figure out like how he would be able to capture your sound despite it not being necessarily like a really gigantic sonic palette.
Well, that's a good question. But the first record, the first record I did with Dave, the self-titled,
Mm-hmm.
it was kind of more of I was sort of just awe-stricken being in RCA for the first time and making a record there and working with Dave because he's such a card man. He's such a interesting fellow as well as, a wizard behind a board, and on any instrument as well. But the thing about it was, and I don't know, I might have expressed this to you before when we talked for the article, but Dave was a little more at the reins for the first record. Mm-hmm. And I remember pretty early on he had said something about, stripping down the approach quite a bit, just because I'd played him some of the songs that I was thinking about recording, and he had figured that was probably the way to go, just based off the first listen, and that's kind of what I was after anyways. But again, where he was sort of more at the helm with that first record, I sort of let him have a few more, I guess, creative calls or decisions that we were making in the studio. I was sort of letting him lead the project a little more than I might have, or than I did on this new record. The Songs of the Plains one was definitely more, I think I had more of an idea of what I wanted to do. Mm-hmm. I kind of had more of a grand scheme in my head of what the record should sound like and production-wise and sonically where everything should be. So I kind of was a little more what's the word I'm looking for? I was a little more in control, I suppose, of the production side of things and sort of making more of my own calls, while at the same time, deferring to Dave in certain situations. But for the most part, I was kind of at the reins for that one. But the record is, the Songs of the Plains thing is I knew there would have to be a certain amount of space,
Right.
just to properly capture the theme and everything of it, and the sparseness really sort of lent itself to the whole wide open sort of thematic Plains thing. And I don't know, what was the question? I don't remember what I'm rambling on about, but
yeah,
it seemed that it made sense, and it worked. It was kind of an if it ain't broke thing too. Like the whole sparseness with the first LP worked so well in RCA that the first time that I figured, if it ain't broke,
yeah,
why go changing it? But
I feel like I'm going to give the listeners we're sitting in the van, so it's a little distracting with people walking by.
Sure.
But yeah, no, I mean, one of the things that obviously your vocals are, I think, the first thing people notice. For me, I really noticed
it felt like a lot of the places I had been to out here in West Texas. There is that sparseness, this space, and it felt like with the last record, you guys like really figured out how to use the space.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I was listening to both the records today, and there's obviously a little bit more, I guess, instrumentation on that first record.
Yeah.
That's going on. It feels like the second record, though, it's you and the band, a little bit of harmonica, a little bit of pedal.
Yeah.
And it's just like those little accents.
Yeah, well, even the accompanying instruments on the second record, the Plains record, they feel more sort of opened up and even more not held back, I guess, but reserved, I guess.
Yeah.
And we were using a different sort of method for conjuring up the reverb. We used an old plate reverb unit from the 60s on this record, and that lent itself to, especially with the vocals and the other instrumentation on there. But the lead stuff that's going on the songs where there is pedal steel or harp playing in the back is it also, to me, feels a little bit more like it was intentionally sparse, as opposed to the last record. And I hope, hopefully that's translated and it's not just me crawling into the record too much. And a lot of that has to do too with the players on it. I can't really take credit for a lot of this, what's going on the record, because I just had so many great people around and legendary pickers helping me out, and I think both Mickey and Lloyd sort of figured out really quick, just even after a couple listens, because we bring them in and then have them listen to the tracks before playing them, and I think within the first few listens they sort of figured out, and those guys are old vets and they're some of the greatest at what they do in the world ever, so I think it didn't take them long to figure out that, hey, this is kind of a less is more thing, and that's something that is a little more emphasized on the more recent record than the last one, or at least I hope so.
Right. It's interesting how Mickey Raphael has such an iconic sound.
It's
you just
second
know
you hear it, it's
but
Mickey,
then he's able to adapt. Obviously, that's why he's been playing with all these people all these years, is his ability to I guess fit into whatever mold.
Yeah, it was cool, man. Mickey sent over a bunch of different just different takes of him playing different sort of styles of harp, but I kept going back, because being that the record's supposed to be a Western, there's a very particular style of harmonica playing that you hear that's, to me, is just the essential Western harmonica, and it's the really fast vibrato sort of if you're watching Rio Bravo, Walter Brennan playing that harp that he plays in that movie. He's got that really quick vibrato, and it's long, sort of drawn out, lonesome notes. And to me, that's and Mickey does a bunch of different stuff on the record, but he kind of we kept going back to that take where on each track where he was playing, where he's sort of doing that style stuff, like Plainsman and Calgary Roundup especially. He's really driving home that Western thing. But yeah, he sent over stuff that was sort of more rhythmic, and stuff that was a little busier, and stuff that was more open-ended, and he's just an old pro, man. It was kind of a treat to have both him and Lloyd and everybody that played on the record come in and lend their talents. Just for a 23-year-old kid from Canada, I was sort of just blown away by it. But yeah, Mickey's great, man. I can talk about him forever, and he's such a sweetheart too. He's one of the nicest people you could possibly meet, and in my opinion, best harmonica player in the world. So there's that.
Obviously this is a Western record, and we've talked about not it being a country record, a Western record, and there being a difference that a lot of people these days, obviously, you just it's the same thing. But
I don't think people don't differentiate as much as they maybe used to back when Western music was a little more prevalent, I guess, in our culture, or on the radio and stuff like that, But
Well, like what? Obviously, I don't think like anyone ever necessarily sets out to make a record to quote, I'm going to bring this back or something like that. But like, what do you do to show maybe like a side of music that people aren't necessarily that they're just not familiar with, you know, that maybe they're just familiar in these little just touchstones of, you know, just like knowing who Ramblin' Jack Elliott is, but obviously a lot of people don't even know that, but you know, like I guess like everyone would know Marty Robbins, most people would. I guess what is it to be able to sound a specific style and take you back to a certain era of music, while also, I guess, like keeping that foot in modern relevancy.
Yeah, that was sort of the the big challenge of this record, was trying to keep it from being a total throwback album, you know, which it is in a lot of ways. You know, I cover a couple traditional cowboy songs, which not a lot of people that I know of put on their records anymore, you know, that sort of music. And obviously a lot of the way I sort of approach my songs and my music is steeped in a lot of tradition and a lot of old school stuff, because that's just what I like, and that's what, you know, I'm most passionate about. All my favorite records are old records, you know. But the big challenge was trying to sort of have that and not let that overpower the whole project, and sort of allow for some sense of, hey, this is a record that was made in 2018, you know, and it shouldn't, you know, that should be somehow relevant in a way. And a lot of that came through the songs and the stories, you know, having the traditional cowboy stuff, and then also doing, you know, something like John Byers, which is a lot more modern. You know, it's a modern story about a couple guys in their Camaros, you know. So sort of balancing timelines out and all those. There's a lot of reoccurring themes in traditional music, no matter what, you know, whether it's Western music or whatever. There's reoccurring themes that you can pretty easily spot if you're, you know, a student of it. And just finding ways to, I guess, take those really important themes of traditional Western music and what makes Western music Western, you know, and sort of place that into these more modern stories, you know, and hope that they mesh right, and hope that it doesn't feel like kind of a juxtaposition sort of thing.
You know, right now I think in music there's a lot of talk about like authenticity and stuff like that.
People love that word. Right,
yeah. Well, I think, I was talking with a friend, and I think like authenticity goes, a little bit of authenticity goes a long way. And what I'm probably more concerned about from an artist is like, where is it coming from a genuine place? Because it's obviously really easy to, you know, write a certain way to make a quick buck, but like, is somebody being genuine about it, you know? And I think that's more the key to everything here. And it's hard to necessarily, like, it's hard to be like, you know, I'm gonna write a song about the 1800s and like have that firsthand experience, you know? So I think like you got to give somebody the, I guess the room to you know what I mean? You got to suspend some belief every once in a while.
Absolutely. You know, that's something that I deal with a lot too, on account of my age and where I come from. You know, people, I think some people might be skeptical just because, you know, to hear anybody that's in their early 20s doing traditional music and trying to make a certain kind of, you know, trying to achieve a certain thing with this kind of record, they'd probably, you know, it'd be really easy to sort of have a certain level of disbelief, I guess, or a certain, you know, skepticism. But I don't know. I try not to think about all that stuff too much. I always figure, you know, a lot of great songwriters tell you just write about what you know, and that's what I try to do with. That's what I've tried to do with all my projects. But a lot of times it's you know, if I'm doing like period stuff, like you're talking about, songs about guys like Wild Bill or songs that, are set in a different time, then you have homework. Then you got to do some research.
Right.
You can't freebase that stuff, because I wasn't around back then. But I do love history. I'm kind of a history nerd myself, which has a lot to do with why I love these old songs, and I'm enamored by old stories. So I'm happy to have that kind of work, that kind of homework to do for songs.
Right.
Because you just gotta know your stuff, man.
Yeah.
You gotta write about what you know, and I guess I subscribe to that belief. I try to do that as best I can.
Right. That's like in Saskatchewan in 1881,
Yeah.
right? When I came across it, I feel like I just lucked across the whole Martin's Farm thing.
Right.
Like that being like a real thing. To me, I love those little pieces that ground a song in an actual reality, no matter
Yeah.
And I think when I was writing about it, I said it could be like 1981 or.
Yeah. For sure. And that song too it's kind of it was intended to be a humorous song with the the whole idea of it's not as much of a period piece as something like Wild Bill, because I'm kind of having more fun with it, and there's a bunch of historical discrepancies in there that people have pointed out to me, because
Like the whole hayseed stuff.
yeah, the second you do that, the second you write a historical song, there's going to be people that jump down your throat about certain things. That's a conversation I have with Corb and Elko, actually, because he does much of that kind of writing too.
Mm-hmm.
But with that sort of thing, there's lines in there that like the joke about Mennonites and how cold it is and stuff like that. It's still, despite it's supposed to be 1881, right? Despite all that, I think folks back home, it's all that stuff's just as relevant today as it ever will be, ever was. So yeah, it goes back to that whole thing of grounding it all in some kind of reality, and grounding it all with some kind of some sort of real experience.
Yeah.
When I'm writing stuff that's strictly fictional, I try to draw on actual experiences and actual things that I know to sort of bring it to life and give it that sense of like, obviously this is a story that I've made up, but hopefully people are able to, hopefully it takes somebody somewhere, and
Right.
then they're not just sitting there going like, well, yeah, likely, sure, kind of thing. But I don't know, a lot of that depends on the listener too, I guess. I just try to do my job as best I can when it comes to those stories and tell them well,
Right. I really love the I guess like the device he used in Kate McCannon, like as far as like how that song starts out with just like the raven is a wicked bird.
Yeah.
Like where did that come from, and like how did you get the decided to kick the song off that way?
That's actually a good example of what we were just talking about. When I wrote that song, I was living in a little apartment in Saskatoon, which is kind of like the big city in Saskatchewan. It's sort of like our Lubbock, I guess. Kind of looks like Lubbock too, actually. It looks pretty similar. But anyways, Saskatoon is our biggest city we have in Saskatchewan. I took 2 years of university up there at the U of S, or University of Saskatchewan, and I was living in this little apartment. And this is before I'd really done. This is long before I had a bunch of shows, and I had a bunch of jobs between that period too. Anyways, but the point is, we had one little window in the apartment, and there was a big tall pine tree outside of it, sort of standing by itself. If you looked at it right, it was kind of centered, looked like a picture frame almost in the window. And one day I wasn't in class, go figure, and sitting there with a guitar, just looking out the window, and a big blackbird, I don't know if it was a raven, but some kind of big blackbird flew up on top of the tree. And that's sort of where the first line started to develop. And that was one of those songs where it all kind of just toppled out really fast. After the first line came the rest of it. And I was listening to a lot of murder ballads at the time, and a lot of kind of, again, the recurring themes in a lot of traditional murder ballads. You'll find them. There's it seems like there's always a river at some point, and there's a lot of things that just keep popping up. So I sort of tried my best to pay homage to all that, as well as tell my own kind of story.
Right.
But yeah, that's where that first line came from. Is from a bird I watched one day fly up on top of a tree while I was skipping class, and then the rest of it sort of just fell out.
Yeah. When did you decide to have the, like the snare gun shots?
That was well, when I wrote that song, I was still playing with a kick drum. I used to play with a kick drum for a while because I'd play in noisy bars on weekends and no one would listen to a guy with an acoustic guitar. So I figured I'd seen other people do that, and I thought, I'll give that kick drum thing a try. So I'd kind of done that 3 stomp thing at the part of the story where he's doing the killing, and eventually I got tired of the kick drum and got rid of it, and sort of just went back to playing acoustic because I had people that were actually listening, and then eventually got a band. But when we recorded it, it was the song sort of turned out differently. I've listened to a lot of people with that song in particular, talk about just how it's changed from the record as opposed to videos of me playing it from right around the time I wrote it. And a lot of things change. I sing it different. Right. My whole style of singing is different now because I've been working on that. But in the studio, things sort of shift. And I was sort of welcoming that because, again, that was that first LP where I was sort of letting Dave have a little more of the control over the production side of things. So he sort of, that song kind of took a different shape, and I'm very proud of it and love the way it sort of turned out. I know a lot of people kind of like the original arrangement better, but that's how songs are, man. Sometimes they change,
Yeah, I'm sure it's been done a whole lot before, but the only other song I can really think of is an Amanda Shire song that has the same little snare trick. Yeah,
she's from around here.
Yeah, she's from here.
Yeah, she's great.
Yeah, but that's what I don't know. I always love those little things in songs like that. You go,
well, at that point, it's you talk about production and arrangement in the studio and on a song, and using it as a device in the storytelling and the songwriting. And that's a good example of that. And that's something that a lot of my heroes. And a lot of my favorite records, you'll sort of hear that kind of thing, and hopefully, I don't think everybody picks up on it, but obviously you have. So it's cool when that it's a rewarding thing when somebody does figure that out, the little nuances.
Yeah, I tweeted about it the other day. If you guys ever had to do like the music video over, it should be with Kate McKinnon. SNL.
Oh yeah, I've gotten a lot of talk about her too. I guess I didn't realize at the time. I don't think I wasn't watching SNL at the time when I wrote that, but I think I probably subconsciously heard her name and thought it sounded good and put a little twist on it. I just was looking for something that sounded really Irish. So here you go.
Yeah. Obviously you're from Canada. Mm-hmm. I know like I feel like we always just kind of generalize places that you're not from, or you never really visited. So I think everyone thinks of Canada as like just one place.
Yeah,
right? Like where everyone knows.
A lot of people down here kind of think of it as one big state.
Yeah, like where everyone knows everyone, that kind of thing. Yeah. And I think a lot of people have done that with like Tennessee and Nashville, or in Texas and whatnot.
Sure.
You've obviously, like the last song on the record, you've mentioned Corb already. Blake is on that song. There's a lot of other stuff coming out of Western Canada. Belle Plaine. Like where are all these people coming from? Is there a lot of like underbelly of Canadian music of the singer-songwriter variety that?
I think there is. I mean, it's just like down here. There's a lot of garbage music that gets put out on the radio, especially in the world of country and western music, where you hear a lot of terrible radio pop stuff, But on the other hand, there's also, folks like the ones you mentioned that are really, their intention is doing it right. We're all trying to fight the good fight and bring that sort of genre back to its roots of just good storytelling. And there is quite a few of us. It's funny, Western Canada is such a sparsely populated area. I mean, Canada in general is a pretty sparsely populated country, but where I'm from, sort of right in the middle, the prairies, they call it Manitoba, Saskatchewan, Alberta, it's incredibly sparsely populated. There's very few people that live out there. a lot of it looks like West Texas. It's flat and a little bit of hill country here and there, sort of before you hit the Rockies and stuff. But it's, you know, it's all a lot of small agrarian communities, farmers, ranchers, people working oil rigs, stuff like that. So there's really not a ton of places to play. I mean, you can find places to play, but there's no really big markets.
Right.
You know, if you want to play a really big market, you have to either do Toronto or Vancouver. And, you know, there's some bigger cities in Alberta. There's Calgary, and we have a couple. Saskatoon is, like I said, the biggest city we have in Saskatchewan. It's really not very big, but it's the biggest one we got. But it's just tough, you know, and you end up, if you're touring up there, it's tough too, because you got to cover a lot of distance to get from one place to another. But, man, I'm so proud of everybody back home, because that hasn't stopped anybody from making great music, you know. There's so many folks back home that I think should have more recognition than they do, and some that are like Belle Plain, who this year has really kind of started to, her newest record, I feel like got a lot of good attention.
Yeah, you were on it too.
Yeah, I did a little singing on there, but yeah, there's a few of us. I don't know if I'd call it an underground or whatever, just because I'm sort of tentative about, you know, that kind of. It's like the whole outlaw thing, you know. I try never to use it because nobody really knows what it means, and everybody, you know, kind of throws it around like you know, I don't even know. I just try to steer clear of it, but yeah, there's plenty of folks up there.
I feel like we all started using these, and I understand it, being a journalist, like you. Like, I hate the term Americana or like all country or
it's all very it's very catch-all, you know?
But I can see why you would have to use it in an article to try to describe someone if you only have a word. You have a word limit. You know what I mean? Where
Corb, I keep referencing him, but I just saw him recently at that cowboy poetry thing in Elko, and he was, part of his live banter was, he was saying, you never know what to call my music, because, you know, to me it's country and western, but you don't want to call it country, because then people will think you're one of those people, you know, one of those assholes on the radio playing that garbage that you hear. And then what did he say? He said, I've decided to call my music agricultural tragic, ag track. So that was pretty good. Might adopt that. But yeah, that's the thing about titles, and when people are trying to, you know, come up with whatever new thing for a genre to sort of, you know, describe it, I guess. It's like everything means something else to everybody, you know. Exactly.
Well, it's that, and anytime I describe anything, I'm like, I feel like I have to put an asterisk next to it, and then that asterisk ends up getting an asterisk, because there's always an exception to.
It's kind of a sticky business, you know? I always, you know, to me, I play my music that I play is Western music, especially nowadays. But I've made records that are, you know, closer to honky tonk or to me or folky or whatever. But I don't bother telling anybody that, because I always figure, you know, they're the ones listening. They're going to come up with whatever they want to call it on their own. They might call it country and western. They might call it western. They might call it outlaw. They might call it alternative country. They might call it Americana. God, there's, you know, 100 different things that they could call it. And to them, you know, that's what it is. And that's fine. You know, it's all very subjective.
Yeah. You, how did you, I guess, like, get into a lot of these folks around here from Texas, like that are probably, I don't know, like, I always think that a lot of the classic guys around here, like Towns and Guy, and they didn't get bigger until they passed away, and then, like, even then, you feel like, you know, they're not necessarily like that big in comparison to, you know what I mean? Like, if you went into the bar here and asked everyone who Towns was, a lot of them would know. If you asked everyone, you know, down this damn street, maybe not. Yeah. You know. So how did, I guess, like, what's your first experience finding the singer-songwriter?
Yeah. Well, you know, I grew up listening to plenty of artists from Texas that are just a lot more well-known, I guess.
Like the Willies.
Yeah, the Willies and the Whalens. My dad's a massive Whalen fan, so I've been hearing his records ever since I was really young, you know, and grateful for it, because I'm also a massive Whalen fan, and I love those guys. But as far as, you know, you talk about people like Towns and people like Guy that are a lot more sort of fly under a lot of people's radars, I guess I kind of, started to discover a lot of those guys through. I got into Steve Earle at a pretty young age, and obviously, you know, he was running buddies with all those guys.
Mm-hmm.
So I can remember, you know, just listening to Steve records and looking online about, you know, his sort of story, and then finding, you know, one day stumbling across a town song. And I'd heard Poncho and Lefty before from, you know, Merle and Willie having their hit with it. So I'd heard some of his songs already, and I knew that they were town songs. Yeah, I don't know. I can't remember exactly how I first discovered, or what the first song might have been that I discovered of those kinds of guys. But I was also a big Dylan fan, you know,
Mm-hmm.
who sort of falls, especially the early '60s stuff, is very Woody Guthrie, folky
Right.
singer-songwriter stuff. So naturally, you know, if you can dig on that stuff, you're probably gonna like a lot of Townes' catalog, because it's sort of a lot of you know, the same foundation, I guess, as far as influences and stuff for
Right.
those guys, and just, you know, acoustic, traditional, derivative songwriting stuff, you know. So it was kind of a pretty easy progression getting into those guys, because I was already listening to a lot of folkier stuff, I guess, and more singer-songwriter stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I guess it was probably through Steve that I've discovered Townes, I'm pretty sure, and then Guy, consequentially afterwards. But yeah, I'm pretty sure.
You know,
I think the first song might have been, I'd heard Poncho and Lefty, and I heard Dead Flowers because I'd seen The Big Lebowski,
right.
but never bothered to, you know, go find out who was singing it. But the first song I might have heard of his was probably Waiting Around to Die, where I actually was aware that it was Townes singing it, you know.
Yeah.
Which is I'm pretty sure that's one of the first ones he wrote too.
Yeah.
It's a heavy
I've
one.
always heard like it's the song that he said like this was the first serious song
Yeah,
I wrote. And
Yeah.
it's like, well, shit. Okay, everyone else,
Yeah.
pack it up.
exactly. Yeah, might as well quit at that point.
The thing about Dylan, though, you mentioned Dylan. He's got like 8 careers in one. That's
It's got
the
8 different people,
Yeah.
and you know, he's one of those guys that was so every decade he seemed like he was a different person, and his music changed. You know?
yeah. Do you have a favorite Dylan
Probably,
character?
probably the '60s Dylan, but you know, I love a lot of like Nashville Skyline, John Wesley Hardin records like that.
Yeah.
Or even Highway 61 revisit. Like I like a lot of that kind of Dylan era stuff too. But the first Bob Dylan songs I fell in love with were all early '60s, just starting up in Greenwich Village Dylan, you know. And I just love the rawness of those recordings and the songs. And you know, he's so young, and he's not Bob Dylan yet. You know, he's just some kid. He's just some beatnik
Right.
kid running around Greenwich Village, and he does a lot of great old folk songs that I love. And there's a lot of recordings of him and demos and stuff of him doing that old stuff
Yeah.
back then. So that's probably my favorite. I also like the way he sang back then. You know, his voice has changed a lot with him over the years, and I really like the way his vocals sound in those early recordings.
Yeah. Those bootleg albums.
Yeah,
The
those are great.
series of it's just such a. If you have the time, like, you know what I mean, like, and you can go through them all. It's really cool to see the map, I guess,
Yeah.
of how these songs, how he became who he was at different periods, right?
Sure.
Some of these bootlegs, though, recently I've not listened to, like, the last couple, because it's almost overwhelming of how much
There's a
material.
lot, man. I feel like every year they release more basement tapes.
Yeah.
You know? It seems like there's an unending amount of those that just keep coming out of the woodwork. But I mean, it's cool. I always like when something from way back in the day that's been hiding somewhere pops up. It's always fun to go back and discover something new. You know.
Yeah, it definitely is. Want to go get a beer?
Yeah, sure. If you got enough, that's good.
Yeah, that's good with me.
Cool, man.
Man, well,
Sweet.
Thank you for coming on.
No worries, buddy. Thanks for having me.